October 20th, 2023. And of course, as always, it's a privilege to be here with you. And today's show is going to be a very, very good one. We have a lot to talk about. So, you have to call up a friend, call up your neighbor, tell them Facing the Nation is on Channel 6. It's on your social media platforms, the People's National Congress Reform Facebook, APNUFC Facebook, and of course, the People National Congress Reform YouTube. So go ahead, call up somebody, tell them Facing the Nation is on. They can't afford to miss today's show. So let's get going. Without any further ado, I want to introduce my guest for today. Absolutely no stranger to Facing the Nation, no stranger to Guyana, and we would want to say no stranger to many countries in the world. He is none other than the leader of the People's National Congress Reform, the leader of the opposition, and he will be our guest today, and we'll be talking about all the issues that are happening. Welcome, Mr. Norton.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me, and a special good afternoon to your listening and viewing audience.
Thank you. Well, my audience know every time we have a guest, whether they're, the first time or they're coming on, I always like to start the show on a very lighter end where I allow the viewers to get to know the guest a little bit more. I know most people know that you're a politician, maybe we talked about it before, since a teenager. You've been a part of politics, you have lectured at the university, and have always been in the forefront of politics. But I want us to find out a little bit more about some of the other things that you did that, maybe we don't exactly know about. I think I was made to understand that you were once the youth representative at UN as well for the country. I believe the first. Let's talk about some of that.
Well, in 1985 was the International Year of the Youth, and I was selected as the Guyanese youth to attend I think it was the 45th General, no, the 40th it might have been, 1940 the 40th anniversary of the United Nations. I was Ghana Youth Rep, and I had the privilege of addressing the General Assembly of the United Nations on matters relating to youth. But it has been a very long time ago.
That's a very long time indeed.
Yeah.
And as well, we've heard a lot about your experience in the Foreign Service. Let's talk about that. How long was that for, and in what capacity?
Well, in the Foreign Service, I was always involved in what was called multilateral diplomacy.
Okay.
Specifically, I was at the UN specifically. I don't remember exactly which year, but Rashleigh Jackson was then the foreign minister, and the environment was now becoming a important issue.
Mm-hmm.
And in the ministry, there was nobody who was focusing on the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I recall him calling me to say, man, I want you to handle the environment. And I was like, well, I didn't study the environment. He said, well, most of us didn't, because really it's new.
Mm-hmm.
And I took up the challenge of beginning to research in the environment, do the work, produce a lot of the government at the time work on the environment.
Mm-hmm.
I was involved in the negotiation of the Biodiversity Convention.
Okay.
I was involved in the negotiation of Agenda 21.
Mm-hmm.
I work specifically with the Caribbean Task Force on the Environment,
Mm-hmm.
and I was chairman of the institutions committee. There was a committee that looked specifically at the institutions that needed to be put in place to deal with the environment. I chaired the Caribbean group on that, and had a lot of involvement in the environment. I always recall one of the things I considered significant. At the time, there was a lot of debate in the United Nations and in CARICOM areas on this question of small island states.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this idea that Guyana was not an island,
Mm-hmm.
and that had its own controversy. And I recall coining the words that we will use to include Guyana, which became small island states and low-lying coastal developing countries, and that allowed Guyana to be part of it, while at the same time not being an island. And the similarities between Guyana as a low-lying coastal state and the island states were drawn,
Mm-hmm.
and we were able to resolve that issue. And while you had the island states as a group,
Mm-hmm.
Guyana was able to be part of it because of the mechanism we use called small island states and low-lying developing countries.
That's a lot of contribution in in that spirit. You talked about biodiversity. I think one of the things out coming from that, I believe, was Karama, if I'm pronouncing
No,
that.
Iwakarama was different.
Okay.
Iwakarama emerged. Rashleigh Jackson was in. We were in New York in 1989
Mm.
when he got the idea. And I always remember he called us up about like 3 a.m. in the cold. That was an idea. I'll come over, and we went over. He was staying at the Intercontinental Hotel. I think I was at Halloran House. Anyhow, we went over, and he started putting out these ideas. And we prepared a document. It didn't start as Iwakrama.
Okay.
Desmond Hoyt was heading to the Commonwealth Summit in I remember where just now, but he was heading to the Commonwealth Summit, and when Rashleigh got the idea, this document was prepared. It was called the Guyana Commonwealth Rainforest Project,
Mm-hmm.
and that information went to Mr. Hoyt, and as president, he said he agreed,
Mm-hmm.
and we fleshed out the document, and it went to a CARICOM Summit. A Commonwealth Summit, and was adopted. And then, if I recall clearly, a professor from India by the name of Professor Swaminathan
Mm-hmm.
was put in charge of the program. And when the site was identified, I recall, I think it's a Amerindian man that actually told the group that this place was named Iwakaramo. And then somewhere along the line, the decision was taken that it would be called Iwakaramo Rainforest
Right.
Project rather than the Guyana Commonwealth Rainforest Project. And that is how that emerged. But we had done considerable work. An interagency team was put up,
Mm-hmm.
involving, I think, the Guyana Defense Force, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in those days, Natural Resource Agency, among others.
Mm-hmm.
And then Desmond Hoyt said, let the Natural Resource Agency become the focal point for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was transferred to Winston King.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, Tyrone Ferguson was in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he and I were the reps on the committee. I ended up going more than him because he was also Director General at the same time. Yeah.
That's a lot. That's definitely a lot of things that would have happened between that period. And I think it's good for persons, to hear a little about that, and even finding out how some of these things came to being. And I mean, I feel it's something we need to begin to talk about more, how a lot of the institutions that we have would have developed and, dispel some of the nonsense that you keep hearing, out there. On this note, it's a good note to carry on, the things that we want to talk about on today's program that, a lot of the public has been back and forthing on, particularly this week. There has been a lot of conversation, of course, on the Venezuela-Guyana issue. And we had some trading of words between, the vice president talking a lot of stuff after your press conference on Tuesday in this regard. But what we know for sure, the opposition and the government would have said that they will stand together on the issue of how they deal with Venezuela and this issue. So let's talk about that a little.
Well, We have always stood together on the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. We believe that one, the arbitral award of 1899 settled the issue, and therefore the land is ours, and that in 1905 the boundaries group did their work and it was demarcated, and in 1931 the tri-junction point was established. Of course, it is known that in 1962, just before we became independence, Venezuela came up with this spurious claim that um, suggested that it wasn't settled and somebody had sold out. I think it was a junior lawyer in the team called Malay Provo, if I remember clearly, who said that there was some deal between the Americans and somebody. I don't remember all the details, but that resulted in the spurious claim. As I understood it, we have always held the position that it is settled, but we then went to the Geneva Agreement, which established that it should be settled by peaceful means. And I think through that mechanism also, Venezuela was invited to put its case. We then went into the good offices, which was back and forth, but no solution. And then we finally decided, look, it will go to the International Court of Justice. At that point, Venezuela objected, saying that this ICJ didn't have jurisdiction. The case was put before the ICJ. The ICJ ruled that it has jurisdiction, and so the matter is before the ICJ. I believe some of the things we see now is an attempt to shift focus away from the court case. And I think what we need to do is to continue to focus on the court case, to establish that this land is ours, and that some of the things Venezuela is doing is really to distract from the court case, because I think they anticipate that they will be ruling in favor of Guyana. And so they are preempting and preparing the grounds for whatever position they will take next. But we are united on this question of the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. However, that doesn't mean we will accept everything that the government does. For instance, in the press conference you referred to, we raised the concern that the government is asleep at the wheel, and there are critical things to be dealt with by the government. For instance, one, how many refugees are here? We need to know that. Two, how many of them are children of Guyanese, have a maternal or paternal link to Guyana. All of that information is important. We ask them to identify how many people that are coming we rejected because they are agents of the Venezuelan state and should not be here. So we have asked them to provide that information because we have had concerns, and in some of the areas our scrutiny has raised the concern that some Venezuelans were turning up with birth certificate, and we know the government had changed the law and made the rules so lax that any leading community leader or any Tushao could have signed. So we believe that we have to be vigilant against that. And so while we are going to be united on the issue, we want to see Guyana's interests protected. And we believe Guyana's interests will only be protected if you have a proper registration of the Venezuelans. If you understand that they are refugees, and at the end of this process of what's happening in their country, they will go home. Once we have those things clear, I think we can move on.
All right, I think so. I think that's clear. The other issue that has been on the front burner for some while is the audit, the first audit issue. As we recently heard from the GRA commissioner head, Mr. Stacia, who would have said that, as he knows, the final close is $214.4 million in regards to that audit. We now see a backpedal of the VP saying that he always stood by the 214, despite, as you would have raised as well in today's press conference, we had the 11 million, then it went to 3 million, then we had an investigation being launched into a public servant at the Ministry of Natural Resources, which has obviously died away now that he's claiming he stood by this. What are your general comments on that?
Look, Barjack Day is dishonest. Barjack Day has difficulty being in the same corner with truth.
Mhm.
Here is a man who said to this country that Exxon Mobil
Mhm.
provided receipts, etc.,
Mhm.
and it was down to 11 million.
Mhm.
He said that on the 24th of August,
Mhm.
2023. He then said that in an engagement with the minister,
Mhm.
it came down to 3 million.
Mhm.
You then come yesterday to say that your position has always been that it was settled and closed at 240.4 million.
Mhm.
Anybody who was paying careful attention will know that this controversy was started by Barry Jackdale
Mhm.
when he contended that it had come down to 11 million. Now you come to tell people you had always said it was closed.
Mhm.
The man is just a pathological liar.
Definitely.
He speaks on issues as he sees it at the time without necessarily relating to the facts.
Mhm.
And so you have a situation where I believe they then said that it was Mr. Gosai who
Yeah.
was responsible.
Mhm.
We took the position that we didn't want to hear anything about Gosai.
Mhm.
The law is clear. The minister has the responsibility to get the documents for audit to ensure that there is an audit.
Mhm.
And if you know the nature of Barry Jackdale, he gives nobody any freedom.
Mhm.
So there is no way this could have been a Gosai issue.
Mhm.
I think we stood our ground on this issue.
Mhm.
I made it very clear that we didn't want to hear anything about the report about Gosai
Mhm.
because for us they were going to scapegoat Gosai. They were going to set him up. And even ExxonMobil um, head didn't say that they scapegoated him, but he said he was sorry for him. He's caught in the
Correct.
middle.
Mhm.
And I thought that was a correct position. Anybody who has been around politics for long would know if you had shifted the focus away from the vice president and the minister and allowed them to get away with saying it is Gosai, you would not have heard that the matter was closed and that
Yeah.
they told them that the matter
Right.
was closed and that it was at 214.4 million.
Mhm.
That happened
Of
because
depression.
at the pressure we rejected the attempt to put it on Gosai and let the minister and vice president
Mhm.
go free. So yesterday he come in his normal somersaulting way to say that their position has always been
Mhm.
that this matter is closed.
Mhm.
But you know what amazes me? Is it that he thinks Guyanese are stupid? Is it that he thinks we are so short on memory that he can say anything today and then tomorrow?
From
He
it.
must recognize you're living in the technological age
Mhm.
in which what you say would have already been stored and it can be replayed.
Mhm.
So people will go and see that he said it came down to 11 million.
Mhm.
He said it came down to 3. Now you come lying barefaced
And given
as
a
ever.
time frame as well, 6 months.
In the last 6 months, he was consistently saying that it is closed. He's just a liar.
Mhm. Mhm. So true. So there is also an issue we saw. I think it was last weekend. Another video surfacing of the president in what I will call an assault on another public servant. This time in Berbice, where he questioned an engineer on the reason for them not having a report of visiting some sort of site. And then he went over to dealing with the arrow for that region. And he even dealt with the Minister of Agriculture in a way I believe is very unbecoming for the position that he holds. And, one of the things as persons were viewing it, talked about, and this is something that we are seeing around, you have the issue of contractors being hired who are overnight contractors. They know nothing about what they're doing. Engineers are basically complaining that, when they recommend or they say something, it is totally shut down because they'll receive a phone call from somewhere above. But yet still, the president goes out an area and displays in this manner when everybody knows, what is happening. And this is, I mean, this time it was another verbal abuse. We saw this in Mocha before, and we saw what I will call the physical abuse as well of his bodyguard in at some event the other day where he shoved the bodyguard. And how do we as citizens sit and how do we take these things and how do we take them into consideration?
Well, first of all, I think he lacks an understanding of professionalism.
Mm.
If you are a president, you are supposed to be governing the society.
Mhm.
You are supposed to have ministers who are giving policy guidance to all the ministries, to the agencies that fall under them.
Mhm.
Now, it is evident that the system has collapsed. And so what he is doing is going out there and trying to solve every problem by harassing public servants. That is a recipe for failure. If a government system is going to function, it has to be guided by rules and regulation. But they themselves violate the rules and regulation. So what they do is they put public servants in a position where they don't know what to do. And so many times, even if a report should go, they would worry about sending a report because they don't know who's going to get blamed and who the president is going to harass. The case of Gosai is a clear case. It is clear that Gosai did not act on his own. He acted on the direction of the ministry and the minister. But here you're dropping him in hot water. And of course, because they instill fear, public servants are not going to get up and say, no, minister, you said X, Y, and Z. Excuse me. So you don't have a professional approach. Additionally, if you listen to Irfan Ali, you would recognize that he doesn't take professional advice. He seems to feel that he knows it all. And when he gets out there, he is into what is called populist politics. He wants to be popular. And the way he chooses to be popular is by ridiculing public servants, by belittling his ministers. Now, it would make him temporarily popular, but generally it will depopularize him because the people who have got to make him succeed will feel belittled and he will run into problems. Now, I agree that public servants need to be brought in line. I agree that people who don't perform should be dealt with. But it is not a case where they are dealing with those who don't perform. They embarrass them in public so that they look popular. And then it continues just like that. We have not heard of anyone who has been fired. And that is why when they talk about disciplining Gosai, like, we need to be clear, Gosai is not part of this. This is a political decision and you have to be responsible. Now, they closed down the public service training school that was established by David Granger. So you are also now bringing people into the public service without any training. The public service ministry lacks leadership, it lacks guidance, and I don't think it has any effective programs. So training, which is critical to producing quality public servants, that training doesn't exist. And then you have ministers who themselves are of no quality of consequence. They don't define policy properly. And once you're not defining policy properly, then you don't give the public servant a guide to work with. You leave that public servant at sea. because there are no clear guidelines. And they have destroyed something that Desmond Hoyt put in place. Desmond Hoyt had wrote a letter to public servants saying if a minister instructs you outside of the confines of the law, that minister must put it in writing. These ministers put nothing in writing. So what in essence happened, they just created conditions to blame anybody. One of the things that struck me when we came to government in 2015, and I went to youth and youth empowerment, there was a paucity of files. You couldn't pick up a file and get the history of a project. Now, once you are not creating files, not having proper professional exchanges, that which is happening now will continue to happen, and it will not be in the interests of the country. Now, I don't think Irfan Ali has the intellectual competence that is needed to run a government. It is one thing to say you have a PhD. It's another thing to manifest the skills of a PhD. And I must submit, he doesn't even manifest the skills of a bachelor's degree. So it's kind of understanding.
Correct. One of the things that leads to that, because as we talk about that, we're seeing a lot of other things happening around us. Like, for instance, we saw the issue at what we call Red Road at Providence there, and the ministers immediately coming out and blaming it on the overburden at the side of the road. But outside of that incident, for instance, you have Grove. This road in the last year probably has been done about 4 to 5 times. It has been resurfaced and redone. And you find the same thing happening. We're having bulges coming up. I noticed on Republic Avenue at one of the bridges, the bridge on Robb Street, they would have put no entry signs on both ends of that bridge because it appears that that as well is either sinking or bulging, one out of the two. And we're seeing this happening over and over, but no real solutions. And we're not even yet talking about the fact that under this government, what we have been seeing is lots of roads being built, but in 2 weeks, the roads that are being built, they're damaged again.
You know, I've spoken on this issue before, but sometimes you feel you're wasting time trying to educate the government. I made a point a while back that we were building roads for 2-ton truck, 5-ton small tonnage. You know, got these double axle, big trucks. Obviously, if you are a serious government, you will have to change the specifications for the road. Nothing like that is happening. And, you know, they're on a course of self-destruction. Common sense should have said if you're going to do these projects, do a road, probably with just overburden for these trucks to go in the direction. But you know what they're doing? They build a road in the community. And then these trucks pass through the road and destroy it. So all around, you're seeing construction and destruction at the same time. Again, it's a manifestation of the incompetence of the government.
Definitely.
A government has to have a clear framework for its infrastructure development. And it has to work out clearly what will be done when. Now, as I understood it, there was a plan to run a road from from Sue's Dyke to the Mahike area. And then you would have had cut off roads. What that would have meant is that a lot of the traffic here, they had something this morning, I think, at
the Orchard
Center, and the place was sheer confusion. You couldn't move anywhere. So clearly there is no planning. The government is not focused on development. They are focused on these contracts to make their friends, families, and favorites rich and at the expense of the people of Guyana. What Guyana needs is an approach in which you develop a plan for transportation, you develop your land use policy so that you are working in a structured way. I gained the impression that is wake up a morning and say, hey, let me put a road from X to Y, and the road start building. And then it's not part of a wider plan. I've continuously said, even in my budget presentation, I see Irfan Ali now saying you're running out of lands on the coast. So you probably want to take over the lands in the interior. But common sense should have told him that if you're talking about climate change, and if you're saying your coast is low, you should have long begun the process of shifting towards the highlands. It would allow you to open lands, it would allow you to create jobs, etc. In my last budget presentation, I had a whole section in which I pointed that out. And they would say that you don't give them proposals and solutions. But my budget presentation was filled with proposals and solutions. But the government is at sea. If you are a corrupt government and your whole focus is on getting rich, it is very difficult to address the concerns of the people. People complain. I went to Fort Ordonance, people are complaining about the houses that they build there. You go right on the same road by Diamond, people are complaining about the houses. It is not an attempt to improve the quality of the life of the people. It's an attempt to ensure money goes into their pockets. And that is why sometimes, even when we're talking about oil and gas resources, I wonder if we get more, if we're not just going to create the conditions for more corruption. What we really need is for these plans, programs to improve the standard of living in this country. Water, for instance. When we left government, we had improved water considerably. People were getting water 24/7. We are back to square one. We pointed out that in electricity, there was a clear plan to increase the generation capacity. There were a number of things that were being done in the electricity energy sector, and the government gone in their own direction. And today we're back to blackouts as the norm. Now, imagine you trying to blame the AP and UAFC.
After 3 years.
Who improved electricity in 2015 to 2020, left you with a plan which you deviated from. And now when you are in trouble with blackouts, etc., you're trying to blame the AP and UAFC. The reality is that the PPP is incompetent. I went to visit, and it has an element of lawlessness in it. I went to visit Shieldstown. I gathered the government went after I left. Where they're doing a housing scheme behind. There are clearly roads that can be used to get there without these big trucks going through the village, throwing up a lot of sun and loom, etc. But because of the lawlessness and the urge to make money, these trucks are allowed to run through the village, nasty, everybody, disrupt their life. I gather they are trying to address it since I went there, and since I pointed out that there are alternative roads. They can go and deliver this stuff without disrupting the lives of the people. But the government isn't interested in that. Their interest is in certain people making money, and the people who are making money, if they could shortcut it and destroy everybody's life, for them the people don't matter. And that is why we say we have to have a people-centered vision. Everything we do must cater for the people and ensure it is aimed at improving the quality of the life of the people. You cannot be running trucks with sand, loom.
It's happening all over.
Nasty in the people's houses, etc. and more so in an environment in which it's avoidable.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking to you because I was there and you see that they could pass on the outside, go into there, deliver what they got to deliver, and come out back. The only reason they're doing what they do is because through the village is a shortcut, and so the people don't matter. And all of those governing issues come because of the lawlessness of this government. It is lawlessness that is permeating every aspect of the society that is causing a lot of the problems. And unless we can deal with the lawlessness and restore law and order to Guyana, excuse me, we were solving crimes. What they did, they removed all the people that
Or trained.
trained to investigate crime. Now, every time you turn up, somebody get murdered. Businessman get murdered the other day.
Yes,
And the likelihood of them solving the crime is very low because they have destroyed the investigative capacity of the Guyana Police Force. And they have to destroy it because a lot of times the people who are linked to crime are linked to them. And so that lawlessness is taking over the society and it's affecting the quality of work. It's affecting the mentality of people. You are in a lawless society. Little wonder you got so many road accidents, speeding, etc. And then what the government does. Last week, or before the last, after the accident, you see police all over the place.
All over the
like if they're enforcing the law. By the time this week here, when you're driving, you don't see none of them. So, again, the government is populist. It's popular after the accident to appear
As if you're
to
doing
dealing with
something.
the issue. But then by the time people quiet down and forget the couple that died, you're back to square one. I think if we don't deal with the lawlessness, we're in deep trouble. Even oil resources won't help us because we're going to squander it, we're going to misuse it, and then with no legal system to ensure that those who do that pay, we're heading in the wrong direction.
One of the things that I wanted to bring up here as well, we would have heard a lot of talk about it maybe about a month or two. And I have visited beyond the area of Pleasance and those areas recently. And what I'm noting in regards to the proposed 4-lane road on the line top is that they have started work at chunks of areas. You see them piling off and doing certain things at different parts. What we did not see to this time was any proper consultation still with residents living and persons plying their trade along that railway embankment. We haven't heard about that. We haven't heard about what will happen when they come to the areas where people are close. And what I fear is that we end up in a situation again where people are bullied just like they were in Mocha, in Hillfoot, and all these other places, the waterfront there. And you bully people and move them again, make them uncomfortable or bring danger to their doors, because we talked about accidents just now, what's happening on the roadway, and you're going through literally villages and exposing them to these same big trucks and all these vehicles because you're opening it up, and you literally, in policy formulation, they talk about the first thing is consultation. You haven't even seen that with anybody, and they're going ahead.
It's not only the lack of consultation, it's the lack of common sense. Why would you you have this 4-lane highway on the outside. You have a lot of land at the back, which a road will pass, which will be at least double lane as well. What is the need for running a 4-lane highway in which you wouldn't have 10 feet on both
Both
sides.
sides. Mhm.
And you are going to expose people to speeding vehicles unless they can put bumps on the highway.
Highways don't have
You will be
bumps.
exposing people to speeding vehicles.
Mhm.
Many of them will not be 4 feet away from the road.
Mhm.
That in itself is a danger.
Danger.
Secondly, if you see what they're doing, and I drive that road, they're doing some here,
Mhm.
some here,
Right.
some there. Now, it is obvious that they're just trying to get money in the pockets of some people,
That's what it looks like.
because it's not a case where you have a structured approach and you're coming from one
One
end,
end to the
or,
next.
or another, the end, or inside out.
It's just
You see some work being done here. Then you go
6
up another.
villages
Then by
later.
the time you meet BV, another set, and then it's chaotic.
Mhm.
And I've raised the point: how could a government say it is planning when in this year and last year you made narrow bridges?
At least
If you had a plan and you were going to do a
4 lane.
highway,
Mhm.
then to deal with taxpayers' money properly, you would have built bridges to suit that.
Mhm.
But you just build new bridges, you put up the barriers for them, etc. While I know you can break them down,
It's a waste of money.
it's a waste of money.
Mhm.
And so, again, but then if Ejid is in charge of infrastructure, what do you expect?
Yeah.
And if the reports out of the Ministry of Public Works are true, that he takes no advice,
Mhm.
it means you have an incompetent person who really, and I'm not saying you could be a minister and not have qualifications in the area,
Mhm.
but if you are prepared to take advice and manage it,
From the technical people.
you can succeed.
Mhm.
But they all come over as lacking knowledge
Mhm.
and unwilling to be guided by competent people. Every engineer you meet in the Ministry of Public Works will tell you that these people here don't listen.
Mhm.
When it comes to Red Road, I mean, when I heard the minister saying it's the stockpile,
And they started moving it around.
now, in the first place, if it is true that it's a stockpile, won't you advise
That you
not,
couldn't.
you couldn't do that, you will damage the road?
Mhm.
I mean, I don't believe it's the stockpile
Mhm. Mhm.
that caused it, because I've seen stockpile all around. I could understand the bridge by Rob Street because it has been there for years
Yeah.
and it probably needs being redone. It would have solved its time.
And it has lots of trucks
brings to-
running on that particular path.
Especially container trucks.
Correct.
Which brings us to the other point. Have they looked at the infrastructure in Georgetown and decide what has to be upgraded
Mhm.
and to what level? I don't think they did that.
Mhm.
You hear the vice president saying they are going to give out contracts for roads in the country. Last year alone, they reported that they were doing 240 something roads,
Mhm.
but they're doing none in Nabakalis.
Mhm.
They're not doing in Golden Grove.
Mhm.
So, and then they argue when you talk about discrimination. How do you explain you're doing every road in your stronghold?
Mhm. Even
fact,
those that don't need doing.
and you're doing over.
Mhm.
But when it comes to the areas that they support the APNU, AFC, you are not doing it.
Mhm.
And that again is a clear indication of the levels of discrimination in the society. So
Mhm.
I think I've said at recent engagements that we are in crisis.
Yeah.
Electricity is in crisis.
Mhm.
Water is in crisis. Sugar
Mhm.
is in crisis. Infrastructure
Mhm.
is in crisis.
Mhm.
And the government is crisis prone. So I don't know where we're headed.
Definitely. You talked about I saw, I think it was last week, there was the reopening of one of those sugar estates, and they were showing, what they're expected and what it looks like. Now, in the National Assembly, you've argued, and your party has argued, that they continuously put these large sums of money into sugar. And every single year, we're seeing a decrease in the production despite all of these monies. And I mean, what are your thoughts on that before?
Well, I wish you had directed them to Vince Roy,
Yeah.
who's done a good job of pointing out that at Rose Hall, they're just bluffing.
Yes,
they
Rose
cannot
Hall was
get up to
opening.
the production levels. They haven't solved the problems that they should have solved.
Mhm,
Look, we are taking a decision that we will right size sugar.
mhm,
We weren't getting rid of it as they claim. We would have right sized it, make it viable at a lower level,
level.
and then move on from there.
Mhm,
The government, I think, is too shame now to say we are not going to open here, we're not going to open there, so they can continue to open.
mhm,
My information is that IFLOT is in trouble,
mhm,
and that they are likely to, well, they're signaling that it's going to go in the direction of oil and gas
mhm.
rather than as a sugar
Sugar.
estate, a sugar factory. So again, when you play populist politics,
Mhm,
the government played populist politics while we were in opposition
mhm,
and gave the impression to sugar workers that they can make sugar viable
mhm,
and that they will revitalize the sugar industry.
mhm,
Now that it is obvious that they can't and they wouldn't, and now that it is obvious that they can't go and say, oh, we have failed,
mhm.
they are coming up with all of these schemes to make them look as though they're successful. But again, the Minister of Agriculture has proven to be a disaster.
Mhm.
I've said to them more than once, one of the ways to help with the cost of living is to expand agriculture in a meaningful way into regions 1, 7, 8, 9, 10, and those villages on the East Coast, and so that they stifle.
Mhm.
Allow them to be involved in agriculture. It will increase production and you'll have more goods to sell, will bring down prices.
Mhm.
But then there is no structured approach again to agriculture.
Mhm.
The focus is on PPP supporters, PPP cronies.
Mhm.
There isn't a proper system of agricultural assistance, for the want of a better word, that will go into those areas and help people solve their problems and advance agriculture.
Mhm.
So they are not dealing with agriculture in a holistic way.
Mhm.
I don't even think they are linking the training they are doing to the agricultural needs of the country.
Mhm.
And so, like any other thing, agriculture is going to be in crisis.
Mhm.
And then you're seeing no plan for agro processing.
Mhm.
I mean, I commented in Parliament. They put in some place for deal with agriculture. I think at Skeldon or Riverton. I don't remember. Now you have your best lands on the east bank of the Berbice,
Mhm.
and you put that. I don't remember what it was, but I commented on it that they were putting a facility, the packaging facility. Yes, the facility to pack, etc.
I think that's scaled on.
At Skeldon,
Yeah.
at one end,
Mhm.
and a lot of your agriculture production at the other end.
Mhm.
Sense would have said it would either have gone to the east bank of
Barbies.
Berbice or somewhere in the center that give both the east bank and the
Easy
quarantine
access.
easy access.
Mhm.
I mean, when I was doing economics, I think for O levels it was, you learned in the first year location matters,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that you deal with industries and etc. based on location. They pay no attention to location. I just think the government is totally incompetent apart from being corrupt.
I agree. Well, time is it's always flying when having all these discussions, and there's so much to talk about, so many issues that we didn't get to touch. But what I want us to talk about here now and give the viewers the opportunity to hear a bit more about, you have been continuously talking about the people-centered development in your parliament speech. Every time you have a press conference, you tend to put in parts of that. I know you can't talk about everything in regards to what you want to do, because we're trying to give them all the ideas. But what are some of the things that you want to tell persons? When we have a coalition government again going into power, what are some of the things that they can look forward to change some of these issues that we've been talking about today?
At the outset, let me say, we have long said we'll have a people-centered development strategy. By that we mean we will use the resources of the country to improve the quality of life of the people across the country.
Mm-hmm.
We have before said that we believe it is critical to house our people, and we are going to be involved in a rent-to-own program to ensure that people can own their own houses without having to find money to put down for a mortgage, etc.
Mm-hmm.
We have also said that we are going to, young people can look forward to grants and low interest loans, in addition to training programs to teach them financial literacy and small business development so that they can become involved in small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
We believe that critical to the development of any country is the promotion of small businesses. In anything.
Mm-hmm.
We have made it clear that we believe people working for less than 150,000 in the present environment should not be paying income tax. They can look forward to that.
Mm-hmm.
People can also look forward to a well-structured approach to cash grants. Not this thing where you wake up and you want to win a local government election, you go and you give somebody a 5,000 or a 10,000 or a 250,000, and the government ministers walking around with cash bags as if they are the national treasury.
Mm-hmm.
You need a structured approach to cash grants. People must be able to say, look, we are going to get, based on objective criteria, $1 million. I just using a figure per year. We also need to, in the schools, cash grants. I agree for school cash grants, but they must be linked to other things. Like, for instance, mechanisms to ensure the money is being spent on school supplies, etc. 2, increase attendance at school. You don't want to give a child money just because they're a child. You want that child in school. You want that child to be learning. And so it should be linked to performance. The other thing I think people can look forward to is, in terms of education, us taking a different approach to education. Our approach will be one in which, in the very early stages, we focus our children on learning to read, write, count, reason, and comprehend. In other words, by the time a child meets grade 3 or 4, that child must be functional, doing those 5 things. The government has this stupidity of putting up on a board where you're not the best in the Caribbean if 100 children doing extremely well, but 14,900 are lost. I've continuously made the point that we have about 16,000 children doing grade 6 or common entrance. And by the time you meet grade 5, by the time you meet
grade 7,
the what used to be Form 5 in our days,
Oh, grade 11. No.
only 5,000 children will
Right.
matriculate.
Mm-hmm.
That has to be unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
We have to rework our education system to ensure that most of our children are matriculating.
Mm-hmm.
There's little or no sense in 20 children who get 23 CXC,
Mm-hmm.
and then thousands of children are non-functional and can't perform. And so education is critical. Then, if you have so many children falling out of school, not matriculated, one of the things you can expect from us as a government is that we are going to put a network of night schools across this country so that children can go back to school, well, adults by then.
Mm-hmm.
And as presidential advisor to David Granger, we did pilot projects. A lot of it was in the newspaper, where those people went back to school and got CXC. I always remember a woman from Sophia, who had, I think, about a couple of children, well, went back, got she CXC, and was able to move on. We need a network of night schools across this country to do two things: help those who would have dropped out of school. I remember a case. I met a girl in Linden who had 8 CXC, but she didn't have mathematics and had nowhere to go to do over mathematics. Night schools should perform those functions, and night schools also create employment at the same time while making. So you can look forward to that. We can also look forward to what we call our 50-50 program, where yearly we will seek to put 50,000 children, people, give them $50,000 as a stipend for them to go to school, to go to GTI. One of the things I found when I was presidential advisor, as we did our research, is that children who live far from GTI or NATI or the one in the West Demerara, many of them drop out
They can't afford.
because they can't afford it. So two things we need to do, and we will do as a government: be able to give them the 50,000 and build accommodation so that those that can't afford to travel can live on campus. Those are some of the things that we have to do.
All right. Thank you so much. And I think we're exactly at our closing time, but we said a lot. And I just want to give you the opportunity, if there is anything that we didn't cover, anything that you think that it is important for Guyanese citizens to understand before we leave.
I think Guyanese need to understand that as a government, the coalition without oil resources delivered a lot. Might not be to individuals, but in terms of improving the quality of life of people, we delivered a lot. And that the future government under us, with oil money, will do everything to improve the quality of life of the Guyanese people. And life will be better under an APNU AFC government.
Thank you so much. So there you have it, viewers. We just concluded our interview with none other than the leader of the People's National Congress Reform and the leader of the opposition, Mr. Aubrey C. Norton, Member of Parliament. I hope that you had a good show today. Of course, see me here next week, 12:30 to 1:30, same time. Next week, I have another special guest for you. We'll be zooming in on other issues. I want to also remind our viewers before we go that continuous registration is ongoing. So for those persons who are not sure or are not on the list at this time, those who need to make any form of corrections as we move forward, that you visit your GCOM office. So please ensure that those young persons who are not registered as yet but are eligible, ensure that you get them out to do that. And we also want to let you know, do you have that add up? On the 28th of October, the People's National Congress will be holding what they will be calling an oldies dance right here at Congress Place. So you can't afford to miss that. I believe the flyer is on screen. We have a few. The Genesis one-man band will be there, the Blue Ribbon and the Boss. Entrance fee is $1,000. Of course, there will be lots of drinks and food on sale. You can't afford to miss it. And as I said, as Guyanese, we have a responsibility to ensure that we take part in what is happening. You might not be able to come out to protest or do something, but when you support events like you support the work that is being put in to ensure that we have certain things in order to deal with the issues that are being faced by all Guyanese. So I am asking you to tell a friend, tell a neighbor about that dance as well. Come out and support. And I hope that you do have a wonderful weekend. And I hope to see you next week, 12:30 to 1:30. Thank you.